Freddy hangs in Ash's shed. When Ash carries Linda's severed head into the work shed in Evil Dead 2, Freddy Krueger's razor glove is hanging above the doorframe behind him, and it stays in frame across several shots while he works. Nobody mentions it. Sam Raimi wrote and directed that film in 1987, and the glove wasn't really a nod to a friend's movie, it was the fourth move in an argument the two of them had been having on screen for a decade. It started with Wes Craven. In The Hills Have Eyes, released in 1977, Craven hung a torn poster for Jaws inside the Carter family's camper, which the people around him read as a straight shot at Steven Spielberg. "My film is scarier than yours." Raimi answered in 1981, putting a shredded Hills Have Eyes poster inside the cabin in The Evil Dead. Craven answered that in 1984, when Nancy Thompson sits up in bed in A Nightmare on Elm Street, fighting to stay awake and watches The Evil Dead on her bedroom television, which quietly puts Ash on screen inside Freddy's own movie. Then came the glove. The whole exchange runs from 1977 to 1987. 4 films, 2 directors, 10 years, and not one line of dialogue about it in any of them. Plenty of write-ups call it a feud, but both men described it as admiration, and neither of them ever claimed the films shared a universe. That hasn't stopped anyone arguing about it for 40 years. The glove even outlived the joke, turning up again in the fruit cellar in the first season finale of Ash vs. Evil Dead. And the franchise Raimi started with that torn poster is still going, because Evil Dead Burn reached cinemas in July of 2026 as the 6th film in the series. Chucky invaded a Spielberg movie. During the final battle of Ready Player One, one player tosses Parzival a Chucky doll, and he throws it into the enemy army like a grenade. It lands, pulls a kitchen knife, and zeroes out a row of panicking Sixers before the camera moves on. Steven Spielberg directed that film in 2018, and this isn't a look-alike doll built to dodge a rights problem. Universal owns Child's Play, and Spielberg had Universal secure the character properly. Universal owns it because of him, too. After the first film, Spielberg pushed producer David Kirshner and creator Don Mancini to take the sequels to Universal, where his friend Sid Sheinberg was running the studio. Brad Dourif, who has voiced Chucky since 1988, came back to record for it and is credited on the film. Here's the wild part. It's the only time a slasher villain from an adults-only franchise has been dropped into a family-facing blockbuster with the original performer still attached. Most of the licensed characters in that movie are silent props standing in a crowd. Chucky got an actual performance, however short. The doll is on screen for a matter of seconds inside a 2-hour film stacked with borrowed faces, which is exactly why it reads as background noise the first time through. It also quietly makes Chucky the most portable horror character of the last 40 years, because nobody in the audience needed him explained. And Dourif came back to play a character with no lines, so the entire performance is a laugh. Jason's basement held the Necronomicon. On a table in the basement of the Voorhees house in Jason Goes to Hell sits the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead from the Evil Dead films, with the Kandarian dagger lying beside it. Neither object is mentioned, nobody picks them up, nobody explains them, and the camera never lingers, which is why the shot slides past almost everyone watching. Director Adam Marcus has said he didn't build a copy for it. He borrowed the prop from Sam Raimi. The film's much louder cameo comes at the very end, when Freddy Krueger's gloved hand punches up out of the dirt, drags Jason's hockey mask under the ground, and laughs. Marcus pitched that ending himself to New Line, which by then controlled both franchises, and it worked as a teaser for a crossover that took another 10 years to arrive, because Freddy vs. Jason didn't reach cinemas until 2003. But the book in the basement is the one doing real work. Marcus has said his intent was that Pamela Voorhees read from the Necronomicon to bring her son back out of the lake, which is the only in-story reason the franchise has ever offered for his immortality. No later Friday the 13th film acknowledges the book, so it has never been canon past this one movie, and Marcus's version stays exactly what he called it, which is intent. 2 rival franchises turn up inside a film that was sold as the last Friday the 13th, and the series has kept releasing films ever since, so the only thing that actually ended was the promise. The joke prop in the basement is also the only explanation the series ever gave for why Jason keeps getting back up. Predator collected an alien skull. In the last minutes of Predator 2, the camera pans along the hunter's trophy wall and stops on the long, eyeless skull of a xenomorph. Stephen Hopkins directed the film in 1990, and the skull sits in the trophy case aboard the Predator ship, in the sequence after Harrigan's fight. 20th Century Fox owned both Alien and Predator, so clearing it was simple. The studio still hesitated. Executives were nervous the shot would pull the audience straight out of the movie. How it got there depends on who's telling it. Hopkins is said to have spotted the skull hanging in Stan Winston's effects shop, left over from Aliens in 1986, and asked for it. Winston artists John Rosengrant and Shane Mahan have described it more casually, as one of a batch of alien skulls the shop was building for the trophy room anyway. Either way, the crossover already existed on paper, because because Dark Horse had started publishing Aliens vs. Predator comics in 1989. What the shot did was make it official, and it led directly to Alien vs. Predator in 2004. This is the rare piece of background set dressing that changed the business instead of just the scene, opening a crossover franchise that has now run for 2 decades. And the thread never got cut, because Predator Badlands put a Weyland-Yutani synthetic at the center of a Predator film in 2025. Craven wore the sweater. The janitor mopping the hallway in Scream is wearing Freddy Krueger's fedora and his red and green striped sweater, and the principal calls him Fred. That janitor is Wes Craven. He directed the film in 1996 and cast himself in the part, credited as Fred, with a long wig and a mustache added so you wouldn't clock him immediately. It lasts about a second. The sweater carries a detail worth catching too, because there are no stripes on the sleeves, which matches the original 1984 A Nightmare on Elm Street, rather than any of the sequels. So Craven dropped his own most famous creation into a film built on mocking the rules that creation invented, and wore the costume himself to do it. Nowhere else does the director, the villain, and the joke turn out to be the same person. The habit outlived him, because the 2022 Scream tattooed the Elm Street house number onto a character's knuckles. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help. Thanks. 4 killers shared 1 locker. Tiffany walks through a police evidence room in Bride of Chucky, past Freddy Krueger's glove, Jason Voorhees' hockey mask, Michael Myers' mask, and Leatherface's chainsaw, all sitting on the same set of shelves. She's there to collect what's left of Chucky. The props are dressed into the room around her, and nobody says a word about any of them. Ronnie Yu directed the film in 1998 from a script by series creator Don Mancini, and that single continuous shot puts 4 separate franchises, owned by 4 separate rights holders, into one frame. Mancini kept going too. Later in the same film, a police officer is killed by a face full of nails, and Chucky asks why that seems so familiar, which is a Hellraiser nod delivered as a punchline. The evidence locker shot is the one scene people point at when they argue that Freddy, Jason, Michael, and Chucky all occupy the same world, though that's a reading built on set dressing rather than anything the films confirm. It's the densest single frame of cross-franchise horror ever shot, and it happens in a sequel most people remember for The Wedding. The film that put 4 franchises in one room is the one nobody counts as a crossover. Billy follows James Wan around. In Insidious, while Josh Lambert takes a phone call in his classroom, a chalk drawing of Billy the Puppet is sitting on the blackboard over his shoulder, spiral cheeks and frilled hair, small enough to pass as student doodling. James Wan directed that film in 2010 and wrote it with Lee Whannell, the same pair who made Saw 6 years earlier, and Billy has been following them around ever since. In Dead Silence, from 2007, the actual puppet sits in the foreground of a corridor while characters walk past a wall of other puppets. In Death Sentence, also from 2007, he shows up as graffiti on a building wall. Whannell kept it going on his own, so Billy is street art in Upgrade in 2018, and in The Invisible Man in 2020, he's a mural on an industrial block, visible for a moment right after a car crash as Cecilia takes the driver's vehicle. That's 5 films. None of them are Saw films. It stopped being an Easter egg a long time ago and became a signature. 2 filmmakers signing their own work in public where anyone can find it. It also reverses the usual direction, because instead of a big franchise renting out its monster, the creators keep smuggling their first one into everything they make. In Dead Silence, he's the actual puppet, and everywhere since, Billy only ever gets to exist as chalk or spray paint. Sam snuck into Christmas. The box of leftover Halloween sweets a boy holds out to his cousins in Krampus has an orange lollipop sitting in it, and that lollipop belongs to Sam, the small figure in the burlap sack from Trick or Treat. Blink, and it's gone. Michael Dougherty co-wrote and directed Krampus in 2015, and he wrote and directed Trick or Treat in 2007. So this is a filmmaker planting his own earlier monster in his own later film. You have to be watching the right version though. The scene is called Waiting Game, and it was cut out of the 2015 theatrical release, surviving there only as a deleted scene on the disc. It came back in the Naughty Cut, Dougherty's director's cut released in December of 2021, which restores about 4 minutes of footage. That makes it a self-cameo rather than a tribute, and the smallest thing on this entire list by a wide margin. Dougherty has said he shot a run of these references and cut most of them, so the one you can still find is a sweet in a box at the edge of a 2-shot. Michael Myers became a commercial. A television behind the bar in Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is playing an advertisement for the original Halloween. Tommy Lee Wallace directed the film in 1982, with John Carpenter and Deborah Hill producing, and it contains no Michael Myers at all, because the plan was to turn Halloween into an anthology with a new story every year. That background television does something quietly strange. Inside the world of Halloween 3, the first 2 Halloween films are films. Michael Myers is fictional. Most cameos put a character into a world that didn't have one, and this one does the opposite, demoting a franchise's own villain into a movie poster inside his own series. The anthology idea didn't take, and the series went back to Myers in 1988 with Halloween 4. The cameo isn't a wink. It's the film quietly writing Michael Myers out of existence. Dreyfuss sang the same song. Piranha 3D opens on a lone fisherman drinking a beer branded Amity and singing, "Show me the way to go home," and then the floor of the lake cracks open underneath him. The fisherman is Richard Dreyfuss. Alexander Aja directed the film in 2010, and Dreyfuss is credited as Matt Boyd, which is the only part of that scene not pointing directly at Jaws. He played Matt Hooper in 1975. The costume matches Hooper down to the knit cap. Amity is the name of the town the shark terrorized, and the song is the one Hooper sings aboard the Orca. Reporting on the film says the production couldn't use the name for rights reasons, so it used everything except the name. It's the closest thing here to a character cameo a studio couldn't legally admit to, and it's the only one that kills off another franchise's survivor in a film that franchise has nothing to do with. The one Jaws character who outlived the shark gets eaten in the first 3 minutes of a movie about much smaller fish. Pinhead guards a nightclub. A wax Pinhead is standing among the monsters at Tinsel, the movie-themed nightclub in Cursed, and Jesse Eisenberg's character walks right past him while taking a phone call. The club is dressed with wax figures of famous monsters, so Pinhead reads as decoration, and nobody in the film ever refers to him. Wes Craven directed Cursed in 2005, which means the man who created Freddy Krueger put Clive Barker's monster on his own doorstep and then said nothing about it. That's the whole gag. Craven's own Freddy is standing in the same room, a figure or two over, next to the Wolfman. Hellraiser is still the one nobody expected him to reach for, because Barker's monster comes out of a completely different school of horror, all ritual and restraint, where Craven's work is noise and nightmare. He built a career on Freddy Krueger, then spent it decorating his films with other people's monsters. Marion Crane's car came back. The car Janet Leigh drives in Halloween H20 is a 1957 Ford, matching the one Marion Crane drove in Psycho, and it carries the same registration plate, NFB 418. Steve Miner directed the film in 1998, and Lee plays Norma, a secretary at the school Laurie Strode runs. Lee played Marion Crane in Psycho in 1960. She's also Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, and Curtis plays Laurie. Then there's the music. As Lee talks to Laurie beside the car, a snippet of Bernard Herrmann's Psycho score comes up underneath the scene. Even the plate is a joke inside a joke, because Hitchcock picked NFB for Norman Francis Bates, and the character Lee plays here is called Norma, one letter off the sun. It's the most layered cameo of the lot. The same actress, the same car, the same plate, and the same composer's music, all stacked into a sequel to a film that had already borrowed from Psycho once. That debt was baked into Halloween from the start, because Donald Pleasance's Dr. Sam Loomis was named after Marion Crane's boyfriend back in 1978. John Hurt died twice. Halfway through Spaceballs, John Hurt sits down at a diner counter, clutches his chest, and a creature bursts out of him exactly the way one did in Alien. He's credited as himself. Mel Brooks directed the film in 1987, and Hurt had played Kane, the original chestburster victim, in Alien in 1979, which makes this the same actor performing his own death scene a second time for a different studio and a different director. His line, as it happens, is a weary, "Oh no, not again." Then the creature puts on a straw hat, picks up a cane, and performs the song and dance routine from the 1955 cartoon One Froggy Evening, control rods visible the whole way through. It set the template every horror parody has used since, which is to get the original performer, repeat the beat, and change the tone. The most quoted line from Hurt's most famous death is one he only ever got to say in a parody. Pennywise haunts the Dark Tower. A half-buried statue in the Dark Tower has a clown's hand breaking the surface of the ground, still holding a bunch of balloons. Nikolai Arcel directed the film in 2017, and the hand sits in a ruined amusement park, with a large sign standing over it reading, Pennywise. Both point at It, Stephen King's novel from 1986. The timing is strange. The film adaptation of It opened only weeks later, in September of 2017, from a different studio entirely. What separates this one from everything else here is that the crossover wasn't invented for the movie. King's novels share a fictional universe, and the link between Derry and the Dark Tower is stated in his own books, rather than dreamed up by a production designer. The film carries several other King nods in the same style. It's also the cameo that landed worst, because the film that planted it was a critical failure, while the film it was pointing at became the highest-grossing R-rated horror release ever made. King had been tying these books together since the 80s, so the movie's only real job was to make the link something you could actually see. The Invisible Man spoke last. After Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Monster have all been dealt with at the end of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, a lit cigarette floats in midair, and a voice introduces itself as the Invisible Man. The voice is Vincent Price, uncredited. Charles Barton directed the film for Universal in 1948, and by that point, the movie has already spent its entire running time hauling monsters back out of retirement. Bela Lugosi returns as Dracula, in the only other feature appearance he ever made as the character after 1931. Lon Chaney Jr. returns as Larry Talbot. Glenn Strange plays Frankenstein's monster. And then, with the story finished and the credits about to roll, Universal drops in one more. Price had played the Invisible Man in The Invisible Man Returns in 1940, so this is the original performer coming back for a single line short enough to miss entirely. He apologizes for turning up too late for the excitement, and says he's the Invisible Man. That's the whole cameo. It works exactly like a hook for a film that hadn't been made yet, though no studio paperwork confirms anyone planned it that way. Universal took 3 years to follow it up, and when Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man finally arrived in 1951, Price wasn't in it. This one is 78 years old, which makes it older than everything else here by at least 29 years, and it pulled the original actor back to do it. Universal was closing a movie on a teaser for another Monsters film in 1948, decades before anyone thought to call it a cinematic universe. If you got something out of this, consider subscribing so you catch every new upload. Thanks for watching.